For Chinese people, Tu Cheng meant the intentional mass killing of civilians. Throughout China's imperial history, rulers and military leaders used it when a city refused to surrender, or just to show their power and scare their enemies into submission. Tu Cheng, or the closest English translation of it, city slaughter, isn't as simple as just a mass killing. First, the people weren't immediately killed. They went through one round of looting after another until they had absolutely nothing. Women were taken and assaulted, and men were tortured and killed one by one to entertain the troops. Next, I'll use a first-hand account from a survivor of the 10 Days of Yangzhou to describe the horror of the massacre. Wang Xiuchu, a scholar from Yangzhou at the end of the Ming Dynasty, survived the brutal massacre by Qing soldiers. He was one of the few who made it out alive. Afterwards, he wrote, "An account of the Yangzhou massacre, or a record of 10 days in Yangzhou, out of a mix of grief and rage." The book describes the entire event he lived through, and the graphic details are truly shocking. Now, let's follow Wang Xiuchu's memories and go back to that living hell. In the early hours of the 25th of April, 1645, Qing forces broke through the north gate of Yangzhou. Before that, a large number of refugees fleeing the war had already entered the city. For instance, Wang Xiuchu's in-laws had come to Yangzhou to escape the chaos in Guizhou. No one could have imagined that fleeing the fighting in the countryside for the city's supposed safety was actually the start of an even worse nightmare. Since communication was limited, rumors were everywhere. Some people said the Qing army was already in the city, others said they were still far away. There were even rumors that the Qing had suffered a huge defeat. Wang Xiuchu had no way of knowing what was actually happening. But the streets were in complete chaos. Early that morning, Wang saw a crowd of panicked people, barefoot and with messy hair, running south. The sight shook him. He grabbed a man and asked what was going on, but the guy was so out of breath he couldn't answer. Before he could figure it out, dozens of horses came charging past, kicking up dust in a desperate rush. In the middle of them was one person, Commander Shi Kefa. It turned out the north side had already fallen. The defenders had tried to break out through the east gate and failed, so they turned south. At that point, not even a top commander had any real information. Wang Xiuchu knew for sure that the enemy had entered the city. As the Chinese saying goes, a defeated army scatters like a landslide. The soldiers on the wall knew all was lost. With Qing troops swarming up the walls like ants, they started fleeing down. The walls were narrow, and the first Qing soldiers to get up there started swinging their swords wildly. In the panic, the defenders shoved each other, with some simply jumping off the wall. Earlier, the commander had set up huge cannons, but the walls were too narrow, so they built new walls in the residential area and placed a giant wooden plank between the old and new walls to act as a cannon base. Now, that same wooden plank became a tool for escape, as soldiers frantically scrambled across it to get into the houses. The newly laid wooden planks were unstable, and some of them flipped over mid-run. Men fell like autumn leaves, with 9 out of 10 dying from the fall, their brains and guts splattered on the ground, some with bones sticking out of their legs. Those lucky enough to get to the rooftops started running along the ridges. The sounds of breaking tiles, scraping blades, and falling stones echoed from the rooftops. The soldiers dropped down into courtyards, hiding in people's private rooms and cellars. The homeowners couldn't stop them. Wang Xiuchu went to his door to look, and all the windows and doors of the houses were shut tight. There was no one on the street. An army is an organized unit. It's only natural that they would divide the city into sections and that their small squads would coordinate their attacks. A massacre isn't a thoughtless, disorganized act. The Qing soldiers quickly took control of their assigned zones, with each squad taking responsibility for a different street or alley. The next step wasn't immediate killing because that was inefficient. People had already hidden their valuables in unexpected places, so the soldiers needed them to trade money for their lives. The people in the city were like lambs to the slaughter. The next thing Wang Xiuchu saw was a few Qing soldiers on tall horses. The cavalry went from house to house, shouting at the doors. Even though they weren't far away, he didn't understand what they were doing until they got closer and he realized they were demanding money. Luckily, this group of soldiers wasn't asking for much. Whatever people could give, they would take. If someone truly had no money, a soldier would just wave a large sword in front of their face, stopping the tip right before their nose, without actually hurting them. But this moment of luck was short-lived. This was only because the newcomers weren't familiar with the area. Once they had made a round and figured out which parts were rich and poor, with help from local guides, their attitude immediately changed. Wang Xiuchu lived in a wealthy area. He was a clever man, and had already told his family to change into clothes that looked like villagers. Back then, there was a huge difference between city and country folk, and their clothes were very different. The villagers wore coarse, torn-up fabric. However, Wang Xiuchu's behaviors and appearance still gave him away. As a scholar, his skin is fair and delicate. One day, he was outside taking care of something when a Qing soldier from a distance suddenly pointed at him and yelled, "Get the guy in the blue clothes!" Terrified, he immediately bolted into a small alley, running faster than he ever had in his life. The soldier chasing him got off his horse, but before his feet even hit the ground, Wang was already far away, and the soldier gave up the chase. After sneaking back home, his family all agreed that it was the neighborhood's fault. This was a rich area, and he didn't look poor, so it was no surprise he was targeted. The family decided they couldn't stay in that awful place anymore and had to move to the poor part of town. Their decision was the right one. The money demands didn't happen in just one round. They came again and again, endlessly. You absolutely couldn't let them know how much money you had. If you were rich and gave too little, you'd die. If you were poor and had nothing, you'd die instantly. Even more terrifying was what people were willing to do to each other. Some took the opportunity to get revenge. One wealthy family was reported to the soldiers by a neighbor who said they were incredibly rich and had a huge amount of assets. The Qing soldiers, led by a guide, went to demand money. The rich family handed over 10,000 ounces of silver, but they were still killed. At that moment, Wang Xiuchu's older brother came running over with a clear message. "They've already started the massacre on the central street. We can't stay here anymore. Let's go together. If the worst happens, at least we'll have died together." Wang Xiuchu had several brothers, some richer than others. His second brother was the poorest and lived in a place called Heijiafen. Typically, any area in a city with fen, tomb or grave, in its name, was a desolate place where the poor lived. Yangzhou was one of the most prosperous cities during the Ming Dynasty, with a population of 100,000 households. Scholars, farmers, artisans, and merchants, people from all walks of life gathered there like a swarm of ants. During the reign of Emperor Jia, a new city wall was built that wrapped around the old one, including what had been the poor neighborhood. Wang's second brother lived there. Among the poor, he was considered wealthy because, based on my analysis, his house was made of brick while the surrounding houses were made of thatch. The family believed that the looting in the poor neighborhood would be much less severe than in the rich one. So, the whole family, including the eldest brother, the youngest brother, sisters-in-law, a nephew, wives, sons, two younger sisters-in-law, and a brother-in-law hid and snuck their way to Hijiafen. But the poor neighborhood was no safer than the rich one. Just think, who would be looting the rich areas? Who would be looting the poor areas? Would the less esteemed, non-mainstream units be richer or more civilized than the main forces? By evening, the massacre in Hijiafen had reached the second brother's doorstep. The group of people was terrified and distraught. Including the second brother's family, there were more than 10 people in total. With nowhere to hide, they climbed onto the roof and hid under a rain blanket. A heavy rain started that night and continued for days, turning the overcrowded city of Yangzhou into a muddy mess. The family stayed awake all night, listening to the wailing from the streets as they hid in the roof's gutter. They didn't dare come down until the street sounds stopped in the early hours of the morning. Throughout the night, someone started fires, with over a dozen blazes visible nearby. The fires burned until the next day, slowly dying out in the morning. When it got light, the family went back to the roof to hide, only to find that over 10 people were already hiding in the roof gutters. The gutters were blind spots, and they thought it was a safe place. However, someone suddenly appeared from the east wing, followed by a soldier with a sword. The soldier was well trained, climbing the roofs and walls as if he were flying. He chased the person who had just appeared, but the fugitive had a head start and was far away. Instead, the soldier saw Wang Xiuchu's family, who were frozen in fear, and started coming toward them. Everyone scrambled to get away, and in the panic, the family scattered in different directions. Wang Xiuchu and his brother stayed together, but they lost the others and couldn't contact them. The citizens stayed in hiding while Qing soldiers searched through the area and looted what they could find. Those in hiding were starving, exhausted, and on edge. The soldiers were also getting angry because people were hiding so well, and it was becoming a hassle to find them. But the soldiers were not fools. They already found a solution. And so, the second round, Draw the Snakes Out of Its Holes, of Tu Chung started, and it was all about smoking the hidden citizens out. Special messengers arrived, carrying official documents and promising safety for anyone who came out to form a line. But people had already seen the killing. They were afraid and hesitated. For most, however, death was inevitable, so they had nothing left to lose. With nowhere left to hide, people actually believed the lies and came out one by one. From Wang Xiuchu's hiding place, more than 50 people came out, half of them women. When Wang's brothers saw how many people were joining the line, they figured it was better to follow the crowd than to be found and cut down. They hoped that by joining the line, they might have a small chance of survival. They joined the queue, and as expected, they were looted. Wang Xiuchu somehow used a special maneuver to avoid being plundered. It's not clear how he did it, but he managed to escape being robbed while his brothers lost all their money. In the line, he saw his friend Zhu Shu's two concubines, both with disheveled hair and their backs exposed, their feet stuck in the mud. One of them was holding a baby girl. The baby cried so loudly that it angered a soldier, who whipped the mother, snatched the baby, and threw her into the mud. Then he forced the crowd to move on. Only 3 soldiers were escorting the group, positioned at the front, middle, and back, and all were armed. Yet, no one tried to escape, because their fate if they ran would likely be worse than what they were facing now. The procession moved slowly. Anyone who couldn't keep up was beaten or even killed. As Wang Xiuchu walked with the group, he saw the horrifying scenes along the road. The ground was littered with the bodies of babies. Some had been trampled by horses, while others lay still on the cold legs of adults. The people on the ground had been cut down or stabbed to death, their brains and guts spilled out. Cries filled the air everywhere. They passed a ditch and a pond, both filled with bodies. At first glance, all you could see were human limbs. The blood flowed into the water, mixing into many shades of red and green. The group was led to a merchant's mansion. It became clear that the official documents promising peace were nothing but lies. People were led into a private residence with high walls for one reason: to be tormented. What was about to begin was a slaughter of the men and the rape of the women. Waiting inside the mansion were soldiers who had already captured several beautiful women. When they saw the returning troops had brought so many people, they roared with laughter. In the main hall, captured middle-aged women were sewing clothes. Due to the days of continuous rain, the clothes of the captured women and the soldiers themselves were filthy. The soldiers had forced the older women, who were skilled at needlework, to make and wash new clothes. Everything outside was muddy, and the women in the group were filthy. They forced all the women to change their clothes, leaving the women with no choice but to undress together, stripping away all their dignity and privacy. Afterward, they crowded around women, drinking and carousing, and once they'd had enough entertainment, they went out to murder people. The men were bound one after another, then systematically called out and executed. Wang Xiuchu had initially accepted his fate, but now he saw an opportunity to flee. With so many prisoners and so few guards, he carefully maneuvered through hidden passages, slipping from the back hall into the rear chambers, crawling through the stables, and threading his way through several compounds. But the only narrow lane leading to freedom was firmly barricaded. He frantically rattled the gate until it gave way, his fingers bleeding from the effort, before finally breaking free. Outside was the base of the city wall, with cavalry everywhere. So he retreated to the mansion next to the house he'd just escaped from, searching for somewhere to hide. But he discovered that every possible hiding place was already occupied, and no one would let him join them. In this massive 5-courtyard compound, there wasn't a single place he could take shelter. He made his way to the front gate, but outside was the main street, crawling with soldiers. He had no choice but to turn back, slipping into a nearby room where he climbed up onto the canopy above a bed and lay flat, hiding there. He'd barely caught his breath when he heard wailing from next door. It was his younger brother's voice, followed by the sound of blades striking. 3 blows, then silence. After a while, he heard his second brother's voice. His second brother pleaded tearfully, "There's money hidden in my family's cellar, let me go get it for you." Again came the sound of blades, then nothing. Wang Xiuchu had cried until no tears remained. The canopy was too dangerous. Right after his second brother died, a soldier entered with a woman, intending to rape her in this room. The woman said this spot was too close to the street and they should go elsewhere, so they left. Wang Xiuchu was right above the bed. Traditional canopy beds couldn't support much weight, and some had openings that nearly exposed him. So he climbed up to the roof beams, where hanging mats provided cover like a suspended ceiling. He hid among the beams for who knows how long. He could hear that every time several cavalry passed by on the street, dozens of men and women would cry out behind them, no telling how many would die. Gradually, the sounds outside died down, so he climbed down from the beams and went to look out on the street. It was already evening, and the street was full of corpses. He called out softly with his head down, but no one responded. Soldiers still passed by occasionally on the street. Wang Xiuchu walked while hiding, making his way to his eldest brother's house. He found the main gate tightly shut and didn't dare knock. After waiting quite a while, he heard his sister-in-law's voice inside, so he knocked. The person who opened the door was actually his own wife. What an unexpected joy. After entering, he learned that his eldest brother had also escaped and returned home earlier. As for his wife and sister-in-law, they had originally been captured and taken to a house full of prisoners. But the soldier who had captured them left on other business, telling another soldier to keep watch. That guard didn't want to just stand around doing nothing, so he took Wang Xiuchu's wife's younger sister away to rape her and never returned. The crowd was thus able to survive, each escaping their bonds and returning home. On the third day, the slaughter became even more severe. The citizens still alive in the city had also found a way to survive. They chose to hide in the mass burial grounds. Wang Xiuchu's wife was among them, and now she was leading the family to hide together. Their hiding spot was behind a coffin among a pile of rotting grass, with Wang Xiuchu's family crouched down, covered by torn straw mats. But if they raised their heads would show. If they stretched their feet would show. No matter what, there wasn't enough space. In the middle of the day, the cemetery turned out to be mostly occupied by the living. The family lay prostrate in silence, but when soldiers approached, one soldier raised his blade, and immediately a chorus of terrified crying erupted from nearby. That's how it was. You might be able to keep yourself from screaming, but could you control everyone else's voices? The Qing soldiers came here to play killing games. They killed all day long. As Wang wrote in his book, the slaughter and looting grew worse. The piled corpses multiplied, unbearable to hear, too horrible to witness. Fortunately, Wang Xiuchu's family was hidden in an extremely concealed spot and ultimately wasn't discovered, managing to survive until nightfall. But bad news kept coming. Wang Xiuchu's sister-in-law was also taken away and never returned. Killing during the day and resting at night was characteristic of the massacre. Darkness was the best protection for those in hiding. At this point, Wang Xiuchu had survived round after round of looting and still had some money left. But soon, he would be extorted of everything. First, a local collaborator guide severely extorted money from him. This guide made money by calling Qing soldiers to arrest people. He could collect rewards from one side while extorting money from the other. But even traitors had their code. He took Wang Xiuchu's money and led the Qing soldiers to other houses instead. Still shaken, Wang Xiuchu was discovered by a teenage soldier and extorted again. The money Wang Xiuchu had hidden in various places was nearly gone. This teenage soldier was cruel and predatory, and wanted to assault Wang Xiuchu's wife in front of him. Even though she was 9 months pregnant, he showed no mercy. Wang Xiuchu had preemptively stained his wife's clothing with blood to deceive the enemy soldier into thinking she was carrying a stillborn child, something inauspicious and pitiful, and thus managed to avoid the assault. The teenage soldier had also captured a young woman, a little girl, and a little boy, presumably for assault as well. The little boy was hungry and asked his mother for food, which enraged the teenage soldier. He raised his blade and split the boy's head open, then left with the young woman and little girl. Wang Xiuchu, who had survived numerous disasters through stealth and constant bribery, had become highly skilled at hiding, yet he was still caught in wave after wave of searches. Fortunately, like a cunning rabbit with multiple burrows, he had hidden away silver, and each time he survived because he could offer them money. But after one squad passed, the next squad didn't recognize the previous squad's amnesty and demanded money all the same. Those who couldn't pay had only one path: death. Appearing poor was one survival technique. But you couldn't actually be poor. In the end, you still had to give them the money, otherwise it was a certain death. Most ordinary people who survived the massacre usually did so because someone showed them mercy, but such instances were too rare. That night, Wang Xiuchu's eldest brother, who had gone missing again, suddenly returned. He said that during the day he had been taken to carry firewood, and after finishing the work, he was actually paid 1,000 wen as wages. Not only that, the leader even gave him a command flag to ensure his safe return to prevent him from being killed by the massacre troops. There were also rumors of a General Wang stationed at the Li residence in their district, who not only refrained from killing but actually saved people. After the massacre order was issued, officers who refused to let their subordinates harm innocents often couldn't control the situation. Naturally, his subordinates also followed the general trend and killed people, but there were quite a few whom he managed to dissuade. The two Qing continued into the fifth day, and rumors spread that all wealth had been looted, with the next step being to wash the city. Washing the city meant killing everyone, leaving no one alive. No one knew where this news came from, but the people believed it without question. More than half of the surviving citizens risked their lives in the middle of the night, lowering themselves down the city walls with ropes. But outside the city walls, what awaited them was another cruel hell. There were not only Qing soldiers, but also gangs of desperate criminals working together to commit atrocities. Law had completely broken down in such times. That day, a soldier with a pointed head and hawk-like eyes discovered Wang Xiuchu's wife and attempted to rape her. When she resisted, the man became vicious, striking her with the back of his blade until her skin split and blood soaked through her clothes. He then dragged her by the hair onto the main street, stopping every few steps to strike her with the blade's back. Fortunately, they encountered a cavalry unit. The cavalry spoke a few words to the man, and he abandoned her and followed them. Someone set fire to the Hejia Fen again, the place where the second brother used to live. There were many poor households there, mostly living in grass huts. When the grass houses caught fire, they quickly turned to ash. The arson was both for entertainment and to force people hiding inside to come out. People were indeed forced out, and the soldiers waiting outside became excited, beheading them one by one. Being alive was difficult, but being dead was actually simple. This was what Wang Xiuchu had learned. He decided to smear his entire body with foul mud, doused himself with human blood, and lay among the mountain of corpses, making it uncertain whether he was alive or dead. His eldest brother had a command flag from a lead soldier, but it was useless. He still had to play dead. While pretending to be dead, he was caught. Wang Xiuchu watched from a distance as a soldier was trying to kill his eldest brother. Compared to Wang Xiuchu, his eldest brother had considerable brute strength and grappled with the soldier. The soldier couldn't overpower the eldest brother and was actually thrown off. The eldest brother abandoned the fight and ran, with the soldier chasing after him. Both vanished into the narrow streets. After half a day, a naked person with disheveled hair suddenly appeared in front of Wang Xiuchu, who was playing dead, nearly scaring him to death. It was his eldest brother. But there were people following behind his eldest brother. It turned out he had still been captured. Since he was caught, he had to pay money to ransom his life. The eldest brother had no money on him, so he deceived the soldier by saying his younger brother had money and that he had come to ask him for it. At that time, Wang Xiuchu only had 1 silver ingot left, so he took it all out and offered it to the Qing soldier. This Qing soldier was not satisfied, thinking it was too little and feeling insulted, so he began attacking the eldest brother. The eldest brother was struck several times and ran while dodging. The attacks continued, and the eldest brother ran while bleeding, leaving a trail of blood for over 100 paces. At that time, Wang Xiuchu had a 5-year-old son named Peng'er, who was very clever and well-behaved. He always listened and stayed quiet, and even in the graveyard he was well-behaved and never made a disturbance. At this moment, Peng'er pulled at the soldier's clothing, pleading for mercy for his uncle. The soldier used Peng'er's clothing to wipe his blade, and after cleaning it, in front of Peng'er, struck again, causing the eldest brother to collapse unconscious. He then grabbed Wang Xiuchu by the hair and dragged him, demanding money. Wang Xiuchu said he truly had no money left, but there were still 2 jars of jewelry and clothing hidden at the Hong family residence. So they went to get the jars. The soldier looted all the jewelry and fine clothes from the jars, leaving only a few tattered pieces. He also spotted a silver lock hidden in Penger's clothing around his neck and took that as well. As he left, he warned Wang Xiuchu, "I won't kill you, but someone else will." Based on this, Wang Xiuchu suspected that the rumored washing of the city was real. A neighbor from the pile of corpses asked him to abandon his family and escape the city by rope. He chose to refuse. He was unwilling to leave because his wife and eldest brother were still here. Wang was someone who compromised and cherished his own life and had strong male chauvinist tendencies. He always applied double standards to women, for instance, criticizing raped women for not choosing to die for their honor, while he himself shaved his head, changed his clothes, kowtowed and bowed, and constantly bribed the enemy, only seeking to preserve his own life. But we cannot say he deserved his fate, nor can we say he was completely without shame. At the very least, when everyone was certain the Qing soldiers were going to wash the city, he still refused to abandon his family. Wang Xiuchu settled his eldest brother and continued pretending to be corpses with his family. They couldn't all stay together because if they did, one being discovered would mean they were all discovered. With no money left and no belongings, if they were found again, there would be no one left in the family. Some hid in corpse piles, others in dung pits. The corpse piles already reeked with a foul stench, and the filthy liquid in the dung pits was even more nauseating. They hid in places people were reluctant to go, yet still lived in constant terror. Later, a Manchu officer in red clothing and black boots, accompanied by followers wearing yellow armor, discovered Wang Xiuchu. Several Yangzhou locals were following behind him as well. The officer told him that tomorrow the knives would be sealed. Sealing the knives meant no more killing was permitted. In other words, the previous massacre had been sanctioned by military orders. This officer gave them some clothing and an ingot of gold, then asked how many days they hadn't eaten and took them for a meal. The sealing of the knives was real, but those below didn't necessarily follow orders completely. There was still looting, still killing. It wasn't until the 2nd day of the 5th month that the situation finally stabilized. This was because the conquered prefectures and counties had been provided with Qing officials and had become Qing territory. Qing soldiers carried placards to reassure the people as they patrolled the streets, telling everyone to be at ease, and ordered monks from various temples along with civilians to collect the corpses. Wang Xiuchu had seen the cremation records, which listed over 800,000 dead in total. On the 4th day of the 5th month, the weather finally cleared. Due to consecutive days of rain, the corpses on the roads had all been soaked and turned blue-green, swollen, and reeking. Everywhere there were people burning bodies. For a time, blue-gray smoke wreathed the entire city. Crying could be heard everywhere, and even the spirits wept in sorrow. After surviving these horrors, Wang Xiuchu recorded his unforgettable experience in what became known as the 10 Days of Yangzhou. His first-hand account circulated for some time, with editions printed not only in the southern Ming territories but also in Japan, and copies even circulated within Qing circles. Wang Xiuchu recorded over 800,000 deaths in the cremation records he saw. Many question this staggering number based on Yangzhou's population, which is understandable given its magnitude. However, Yangzhou had become a refuge for people from all directions, with many refugees flooding into the city before it fell. The population density was horrific, housing far more than its normal inhabitants. Personal accounts have their inherent limitations. They are vivid but narrow in scope, unable to provide a complete picture. Wang Xiuchu's narrative focuses on survival, perhaps giving the impression that Yangzhou's people only thought of staying alive without resistance. But in reality, street fighting erupted throughout the city. A general in the city called Lu Xiaoji led 400 men in urban combat, dying alongside his officers. Countless scholars, doctors, artists, and common citizens chose death over submission. Some were heroic, others feared death. This is normal. Some were cruel, others terrified. This too is common. The cruel acts of the Qing dynasty during their invasion of China caused millions to die, but the nightmare didn't end with the dead. It lasted far longer for survivors like Wang Xiuchu, who had to endure the unbearable pain of losing their loved ones and carry those memories for the rest of their lives. Qing, the massacre of entire cities during conquest, is an inhuman practice. What's even more shocking is that Yangzhou was not an isolated incident. Throughout Chinese history, city massacres occurred repeatedly during invasions and conquests. Some were ordered by brutal tyrants, but others were commanded by emperors, with otherwise good reputations, men history remembers as capable rulers who nonetheless sanctioned the systematic slaughter of civilians. The practice reveals a darker truth about power and conquest that transcends any single dynasty or ruler. For the survivors like Wang Xiuchu, the real tragedy wasn't just the violence itself, but having to live on in a world where such cruelty was considered an acceptable tool of war. If you want to learn more about Qing massacres across different Chinese dynasties and the stories of those who lived through them, like and subscribe for more content.